Hello, Bob. Hello, Bob.
Hi, Conn. How you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Good. Thanks for taking the time on election eve to talk to us.
Anything for you, Bob.
Anything?
Anything.
Okay. Nothing comes to mind, actually, that I want, since you can't control the outcome of this election. Although you're trying, I notice. I mean, on Twitter, you're out there, man. You're fighting.
I'm somewhat more prolific than you are. It's true.
True, and probably more of a fighter. I mean, we should say, in case there's anyone who doesn't suspect your partisan inclinations, you used to be at the Heritage Foundation. Now you're at the Washington Examiner.
All true.
Something of a Romney fan, I infer from, at least given the choice between Romney and Obama.
Right.
I think it's safe to call you is it too much to call you a fierce partisan infighter, Conn?
Ooh. Well, I mean, when it comes down to Republican on Republican violence, I get into that too. So I would consider myself, more of a conservative, and the Republican Party is just the very imperfect political vessel through which, I try to interact.
So you can be a fierce partisan or fierce intra-partisan infighter as the interests of your ideology dictate.
Exactly.
Okay. And right now that means partisan warfare. But we'll talk about what is left in the Republican arsenal at this point and the Democratic arsenal. But first, tell me, how optimistic are you feeling about Romney's chances? Tell me the truth.
Truth, I think, looking at all these polls, I've been saying for, at least 2 weeks now that you've got two very different turnout models out there. You've got the Rasmussen Gallup turnout model, and then you've got the PPP Marist NBC News model. And
okay, now explain that a little, because I've heard references to that, but don't get it entirely. Are you talking about the actual logic behind the statistical corrections those two different polling groups apply?
Right. Well, I mean, they're not only statistical corrections. I mean, they go through the fact is that, response rates for pollsters are way down. They're down to like 9%. And so a lot of what you see in the polling data is just, pollsters trying to guess and trying to figure out who to let into their likely voter screen and who not to let into the likely voter screen. And, if you look at who Gallup shows turning out at the election, it looks a lot like the 2008 election, which actually favors Romney because Obama needs the electorate to be about 2 percentage points less white than it was in 2008. So if it holds steady and we get about the same electorate we had in 2008, Romney should win. But if Latinos turn out in record numbers, if African Americans can maintain what they did last time, then it's going to be an Obama win. And I think it's going to break one way or the other.
And so we don't know, I guess, exactly what the Gallup screening mechanism is, because it's been the most out there. I mean, Rasmussen has lately come into line with the national polls, although today I noticed they've got Romney up by 1 point.
Right.
But Gallup, when it quit polling at the hurricane, was out there like 5-6 points for Romney, which was well beyond Rasmussen. Do we know what the criterion is for determining likely voters on Gallup's part?
I don't know. I mean, before they went dark, that's one thing about Gallup is after Sandy hit Sandy hit Monday, and on Wednesday they basically said national polling is pretty useless at this point. People aren't picking up the phones. We couldn't give out a credible sample. So they said they were going to start polling last Thursday through yesterday, Sunday, and then they would make a determination Sunday night whether or not they were going to post anything. And I've been looking; they haven't posted anything. So I think we've heard the last from Gallup, which is their last poll.
They usually post at 1 p.m. though, and it's not quite there yet, right?
No. They haven't posted anything since. Since Sandy.
I know, but I mean, if they're going to post something today, we would expect it to show up at 1 p.m. Which, anyway.
Right. Well, but also we would have expected them to, say they're going to post something. I mean, if you go to the Gallup site right now. You'll see that they've totally taken down the tracking poll sidebar. Like it no longer says we post at 1 p.m. every day. It's just it has a whole bunch of old info.
Well, I'll tell you, Gallup is located in the very town I am in right now, and they may not have power. Some of this town still does not, and I didn't for several days. Okay, so that I use. I mean, there are, of course, noises of optimism from both sides, but I mean, how sincere do we think it is? Because by and large,
well, we can definitely say that the optimism on the liberal side is quite sincere, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're an Obama partisan, then you definitely think Obama's going to win.
Yeah, because the polls, if the polls are right, basically he wins. If the state polls are right, he wins the Electoral College, right? We all agree on that.
Well, I mean, Rasmussen has been doing state polls too that shows Rasmussen has Obama up in, Romney up in Ohio, Romney up in Virginia, and PPP disagrees, So, PPP has Obama winning Florida too, right?
Yeah, but in like Ohio, if you go to the Real Clear Politics list of Ohio polls and look at like the last 6, 7 polls, there's not a single Romney, nothing's in red, and the average Obama lead is like 3 points.
I believe, last time I checked, Rasmussen either had Romney tied or ahead in Ohio.
I think it would be tied because there's no red. There's no red in that. I looked half an hour ago.
No, right. I mean, if you go by, there's lots of state polls out there. Rasmussen is definitely an outlier in the state polls. I mean, if you look at the state polls of say Virginia, I believe Obama's ahead there too, right? But Rasmussen has a very different take. So all I'm saying is that there even on the state level, there are 2 different tracks of what it's going to look like. And you have a whole bunch of public state polling showing one thing, and you have, Rasmussen and Gallup in the national polls showing another.
Yeah. Although the national polls have drifted toward Obama lately, and not by a lot, but over the last few days, and I think just a little, but I think you hold Hurricane Sandy responsible for this?
I don't think I'm the only one. I mean, the Chris Cillizza, the Washington Post, looked at the Wall Street Journal poll, saw the same thing. If you look at Pew, Obama's gone from +8 in the Northeast to +21. Political Battleground showed the same thing, just a huge double-digit soaring lead for Obama.
In the Northeast.
In the Northeast, right. This is all Northeast local.
But if that's the case, it doesn't matter that much, right? I mean, there aren't the only states are in play in the Northeast. New Hampshire was not touched by the hurricane, so I doubt that's accounting for it.
Well, you're still getting the same kind of media markets, coverage, focus of what's going on. But I mean, will it affect Electoral College? No, but will it affect the headline Pew, Politico, national numbers? I mean, of course it will. I mean, somewhat, probably.
So the scenario is that this will lead to national polls more favorable to Obama.
Right.
Hurricane Sandy will.
Right.
And even though that will not happen in a way that affects the likely electoral outcome, it will lead to a sense of inevitability for Obama that you think will be damaging to the turnout effort of the Republicans. Is that it?
No, I don't think that. I just think that that's what we're seeing in the national polls. I don't think there's been a lot of change other than.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, it sounds like some people are starting to blame Sandy not just for the national polls, but preemptively blame Sandy in the event that Romney loses. So that's why I'm asking about things about Sandy that could actually affect the election outcome.
Oh, no. I think it is affecting the final polling. I don't think Sandy's going to affect the final outcome, except, there were a couple of counties in Ohio that were out of power for a while. Mm-hmm. So maybe in those counties, but outside of that, I don't think it's going to affect.
So you don't think, because one scenario was
other than New Hampshire, I do think it has a chance to change.
Because like the Drudge Report was trying to make Sandy sound like the apocalypse. I mean, it was just all about fights breaking out.
From my understanding, on Staten Island, it was.
Well, right, but that's my question. Was there some belief on the right that if and look, there's still time. There could be more and more negative coverage of Sandy over the next 24 hours, I guess. And there has been some. I mean, there has been some coverage suggesting that, look, not everyone's being taken care of. And I think for a while at least, the kind of thinking on the right was that, well, maybe enough of this coverage will be bad for Obama.
No, I definitely saw that. There are some people saying that, if gas lines turn ugly, people see what's going on in Staten Island. It could go bad. No doubt about it. I think there's just not enough time left for that.
And so far, the coverage hasn't been all that negative, you think?
From what I've seen, not really, no.
Yeah.
I mean, especially as it relates to Obama.
So, in general, you think it's kind of almost too late for stuff to actually happen, and it's just a question of which polls are right.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about this last-minute bid by Romney to take Pennsylvania? Some people read that as a sign of desperation. Is it as him saying, yeah, it's true, Obama's got a firewall with Ohio and a few other states, but Pennsylvania's a very big enchilada. I even thought that maybe they started rethinking this when Sandy hit, and they thought, well, hey, who knows what effect Sandy will have on Pennsylvania? It did hit, it did affect Pennsylvania. Let's take a gamble. That sounds, in any event, it seems a little to me like a Hail Mary pass. Well, what do you think of it?
I think it was more of diminishing returns. There's only so much advertising you can do in Ohio. And after a while, the 3,000th ad isn't going to get you much. It isn't really going to move the needle. But you could have more of a stance in Pennsylvania where it's, is virgin territory. They haven't seen any ads. They haven't seen any candidates. So you're just getting more bang for your probability buck going into a state that has basically not seen the candidates or the ads. Whereas in Ohio, those voters can recite every ad, 6 times by now.
Yeah. And what do you think the chances are in Pennsylvania for Romney?
I am not bullish on Pennsylvania.
No. I'm glad to hear that, because you know way more about this stuff than I do.
I don't know about that.
Oh, believe me.
I do have family in Pennsylvania, though.
Oh, what part?
Allentown area.
Romney voters?
No. My father-in-law is a union guy. As long as I've known him, he's only voted in one election, and that was in 2008 for Obama. And he is not voting this year. But that's more of his normal. His normal stance is to not vote.
Okay. So you mentioned the saturation of advertising. What do you think of the kind of quality of the campaign? I mean, campaigns don't tend to make me feel good about America when I actually see the ads that are running, which I don't much because I live in a blue state. But what do you think about the messaging?
The messaging?
Yeah, on both sides. I mean, look, your candidate has lately gotten slagged for the Jeep ad, right? I don't know if you think the slagging was fair or unfair. The ad seemed a bit misleading. Not factually wrong, technically, at any one point, I think.
Right. It's election season. Kind of a bit, thick skin about these things. I mean, Obama lied during the debate about the sequester, or maybe lie is a tough word. He said that it was Congress came up with the idea. Bob Woodward kind of covered him the next day, saying, no, he's wrong. Obama's White House came up with it, but maybe Obama just doesn't know what's going on there. So candidates, say things. They run these ads. I mean, it's a lot better now than it was in June. I mean, we had all these Bain ads calling Romney a job-killing vampire. So pretty much anything that allows him to be human is a step in the right direction after that. I haven't seen anything on either side that's been particularly terrible.
Now, do you mind kind of gaming out both scenarios, one where Romney loses and one where Obama loses, and kind of imagining the recriminations and the arguments about, in both cases, about what happened and where the party should head?
Sure. I mean, I think it's much more interesting to talk about what will happen in Congress in the fiscal cliff after either of them wins. But we can do party intra-fights, too.
Okay. Well, I'm happy for you to explain the fiscal cliff stuff to me, because I'm totally clueless there.
Oh, come on, Bob.
Is that so? Are you saying that's one big? I mean, that's an interesting question. Is what about this election actually matters? I have my own ideas about like foreign policy and stuff, but you tell me, what is the big consequence you see for the fiscal cliff?
Oh, well, if Romney wins, I think Obama, kind of signs a month, maybe 3-month extension, probably just a month extension on current policy. And that's still a big enough mess for Romney to inherit right away. So you'd see, all the tax rates would stay where they are. The spending would stay where the sequester wouldn't happen on either domestic or the defense side. And then the Republicans would have to sort that out all away, which would still be a pretty big mess, because even with the fiscal cliff, people have forgotten that the debt limit's going to be right there in January too. Treasury has already been saying we're going to reach the debt limit this year in December, and they're going to have to go to emergency measures again just to extend it. So, if Romney wins, he's got the fiscal cliff. He has to fight through taxes with Democrats and the debt limit. So it's going to be pretty hairy for him right away.
And you're assuming a Democratic Senate even if Romney wins?
Yes. There's just been way too many mess ups on the Republican side for them to take the Senate.
Okay, and then what if Obama wins?
Obama wins. I think we're going cliff jumping. I think they're going to go over it. I believe Obama when he told. When I guess it wasn't him personally, but it was his staffers were saying that he'd rather go over the cliff than do the tax hikes, and I think there's a strong enough contingent in the party. You've had Howard Dean say we should go over the cliff. Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, has written an op-ed saying we should go over the cliff. Maria Cantwell, the senator from Washington, has not Cantwell, but Patty Murray from Washington has said the same thing.
But in this scenario, that only happens if the Republicans don't cave on taxes?
Right.
Which you think they would never do, no matter how convincingly Obama et al. Insists that they will do the cliff?
No.
Because, this could be a bluff. These are the kinds of things you would say.
Right. You mean it could be a bluff on whose part?
On Obama's. I'd say...
It could be. And he has caved before. Right? He caved in 2010. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility for him to cave.
But anyway, you don't think the Republicans would cave even if they were convinced that he's going to take us over the cliff?
It would definitely depend on, how convincing their win was in the House. From the people I've talked to in House, races on the House side, there's definitely an element there that is willing to cave, but the leadership there is just so afraid of their Tea Party base that if enough conservative House members got elected and the message that they brought back was no, we're not giving up on this, then the leadership is going to listen to their constituents.
I see. And I gather what is the basic issue here, that Obama would want to let the middle-class tax cuts persist, but the upper-class tax cuts expire? Right. And that would be the whole fight.
That would be part of it. But there's so many other things that have to go that have to be settled too, right? You have the doc payment fixes, the Medicare fixes. You have basically doctors are on schedule to get paid about 30% less. Then of course you have the defense and domestic sequester cuts. Then you've also got the AMT, which is also not separate from the Bush tax rates. And then I still believe Obama is going to try to push for some type of extension of the payroll tax cut.
Isn't it kind of hard to imagine any politician, when push comes to shove, wanting to be associated with the fiscal cliff jump? I haven't looked at the cuts up close,
right?
But I gather some of them would, someone in America, almost everyone in America would be pretty upset about at least some of the ensuing spending cuts, right?
Well, in a way, I believe we've already felt a lot of the fiscal cliff hurt already. And you've seen articles in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, basically saying the same thing. Is that the businesses have already been factoring in the possibility of this happening. Spending has already slowed. The GDP has already taken a hit. How much more of a hit would happen if we actually did it? And when you listen to Howard Dean, when you listen to Jennifer Granholm, what they say is like, yeah, we would get hurt for a quarter or two. We would definitely kind of double dip a bit, but then we'd come roaring back, and we'd have we'd have won everything. We'd have won on taxes, we'd have won on spending, and we wouldn't have had to give up any changes in Medicare, Social Security. So it's kind of a long-term, gamble.
Wait, who was saying that? I'm sorry.
Howard Dean and Jennifer Granholm in their op-eds for going over the fiscal cliff.
So are the spending cuts really that lopsided in favor of Democratic priorities? The spending cuts that come automatically with the fiscal cliff?
No, they're not. I mean, and that was the big thing about why the Democrats ultimately signed off on them, is that they mostly hit defense and they do not hit, for the most part, entitlements. They hit
Right.
Medicaid a little bit, but they don't hit Medicare and they don't hit Social Security, which was a big sticking point for Reid. That's the only way Reid signed off on them, is if they protected, the Democratic holy place, holy entitlements, that Medicare and Social Security would be saved.
Well, what? So Medicaid is almost the only thing that would hurt the Democratic constituency?
Right.
So they've thrown the poor people under the bus. So let's suppose the a Romney loss, and then we can suppose an Obama loss. Okay, there would be Republican recrimination. I mean, some people might blame Sandy, whatever, but at some point there's soul searching. Both about, I guess, the candidate and the ideology the candidate brought to the election, right? Those are the two things you can blame. How do you imagine the argument kind of playing out in Republican circles?
Well, you're going to have conservatives saying, this is what happened when you elect a moderate, right? I mean, the Republican primary is very, very painful for me. I didn't like any of the choices. It lasted forever. I mean, you know what? We went back to Herman Cain twice. We were seriously thinking about Newt Gingrich. Rick Santorum won states. I mean, the Republican base did not want Romney as the nominee, right? I mean, we clearly saw that. So it's mostly going to fall on, we've lost 2 elections, and it's because we elected 2 moderates to represent us. I think that's going to be the message for 75% of the party. Is that we have to, nominate a real conservative.
But, as you just suggested, I think you're going to need to find a better one than was represented in the primaries, right? I mean, the fact is,
absolutely.
That's what I would find alarming if I were a Republican, is like, this was the best of the bunch. I mean, in the event, if there is a Republican loss, I mean, Romney was, it seems to me, far and away the most plausible winner of the general election in that bunch.
But you had a bunch of people who didn't run, right? I mean, you had, Jindal didn't run. You had Mitch Daniels decide not to run. You had Paul Ryan, who said he was a little too green to take on Mitt Romney. Same with Marco Rubio. There's a strong bench of hardcore conservative candidates who are going to look very strong next time around.
I guess, but do you think, for example, that Ryan actually helped Romney here? I think he hurt him. I
don't see how you can say that. Where has Ryan hurt him?
Well, I think the policies associated with Ryan, the fiscal the domestic policies, I think did not help him with the electorate. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean we'll see
Medicare vouchers and stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll see whether or not how bad Romney does with the seniors in Florida. I think Romney does fine with seniors in Florida. I think Romney takes Florida.
He may take Florida, but I don't know. That's not the only issue they played in Florida.
Look, the Democrats ran against Paul Ryan in 2010 and now in 2012, and they're going to get killed both times. They got killed in 2010, and everyone I talk to says Republicans are going to take the House again, despite the fact that Democrats tried their best to run against Paul Ryan, and they've clearly failed twice now.
I just find Ryan such a weird guy. I don't know. It's just maybe a personal reaction I have to him. He must remind me of somebody I didn't like in high school.
I don't know what to say about that. I don't think he'd like anybody I went to high school with.
You don't think I would?
No. I said he doesn't remind me of anyone I went to high school with.
I thought you said I wouldn't like anybody you went to high school with. I thought you were going to I don't know. But anyway, I'm sure
I went to high school in Oakland. I'm sure there's tons of people you would have liked in my high school.
Totally. I went to junior high across the bay, man. We've talked about this. So here's one thing I had heard months ago that whether Romney wins or not, this is the last time the Republicans can try to win with an essentially all-white coalition. Right?
It's been said
that America is just getting too ethnically diverse. Now, is it? Well, if we're assuming a Romney loss, don't you think that's one issue that's going to come up? And if so, what would you do? What policies would you shift on if you wanted to bring a substantial number of non-whites into the Republican coalition?
It's a great question. It gets asked every 2 years. This is not an issue that just popped up. Politico has a story out today. I think it's by Jonathan Martin, and it's got the usual Newt Gingrich quotes in it. We need to pass immigration reform so we can bring Latinos in, and the problem with an amnesty is I just don't see how it helps Republicans in any way. If Obama gets reelected and does an amnesty deal with House Republicans, the headline, the history books are going to be Obama brings amnesty to Latino population. So I don't see how Republicans moving on that helps them. It only helps the Democrats' brand in that instance. I don't see how Republicans caving on amnesty brings them any votes. Mm-hmm. So it has to be through other stuff. It has to be through other issues.
Like what?
I don't know. I mean, on a long enough timeline, the Democrat record on the economy has to get bad enough where minorities start looking to vote another way. There's also, Republicans are also doing terrible among Asians, among Indians.
Are Republicans doing that badly among Asians? I was just looking at a breakdown of Ohio-only numbers, granted, but I noticed that. What did I notice? Actually, I noticed Indians were on balance on the Republican bandwagon, and Asians were about evenly split. But what is the deal nationwide?
Yeah, I mean, when I've looked at it nationwide, it's generally been that Indians and Asians are, kind of more matching, not quite as high Democrat turnout as Latinos, but approaching it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that would be a problem, and it doesn't kind of obviously add up. I mean, I wouldn't know what prediction to make about the Asian American vote, just in the abstract. I don't have a theory for why they would necessarily jump on the Democratic bandwagon en masse.
No, I mean, I think a lot of it is cultural. I think the GOP does just have a bad image. I mean, when you watch the convention, it's just obviously very not a welcoming party to non-white America.
Yeah.
Superficial stuff like just the music selection. I mean, even as a Californian, it's just a little country heavy for me. Like when I watch Republican stuff, I don't see me there. It's definitely kind of more kind of middle America than I'm used to.
That's interesting.
So I do think they need to change that, and I think as much as we constantly say that the economy matters, taxes matter, stuff like that, just who people identify with on a tribal level really motivates a lot of people to vote and associate, and I think that Republicans need to rebrand in that way.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking they can almost do it with atmospherics, or that they at least need to do it with atmospherics. I mean, it's kind of a vicious circle, right? The reason the Republican convention looks a little forbidding to minorities is that it's a bunch of white people, and to change that, you got to, right? I mean, you got to change that to change the atmospherics. So isn't there a little something circular about this endeavor?
A little bit, but it's also picking the right candidates. Like if you were to get Bobby Jindal in there, or more people to leaders to kind of lead and show that, hey, this is the face of our party. These are the type of people that are on our team.
You don't think Herbert Kane was quite the ticket, huh?
No, he was not. He was not my favorite Republican candidate from this cycle. No,
I loved him. I thought he was great.
I'm sure you did.
I wanted him to stay in the race forever.
I'm sure you loved him as much as I loved Kucinich.
So it sounds like you think that the bulk of the recriminations are that. I mean, this sounds like a real fight coming up if Romney loses. You've got on the one hand people saying we're not conservative enough, and you've got on the other hand people pointing out that an all-white coalition may not get the job done. And some people would argue that there's real tension between those two things. In other words, that if you let the Tea Party prevail in the debate, it's going to be that much harder to attract non-white voters. Am I wrong?
Well, I think you're conflating, immigration with absolutely every other issue. Like, I'm not so sure that, Asians, Indians, Latinos care, that much about immigration so that it just dictates their response on everything. I think there are a lot of other issues that Republicans can appeal to minorities on, and they need to do a better job doing it.
But on the debate, on the part of the debate that's about, well, were we conservative enough or were we too conservative? Because you could kind of argue it either way. Obama tried to paint Romney as too conservative, and then and in fact. Consistent with the theory that conservatism was the problem, it was when Romney moved toward the middle in that first debate, although I certainly don't think that's the only thing that was going on in that debate, but he did that in the first debate, and something worked for him in that first debate. So you could argue that no, the problem was what conservative baggage he couldn't unload before the election. I mean, that seems a plausible argument. But you're suspecting that on this particular argument, the conservatives are going to win. The consensus in the party will be back to our roots.
Yeah, I just don't see any other champions or arguments on the other side. I mean,
I just gave a really good one.
What policies? What policies? Like, if only Romney had called for higher taxes on the rich, he would have won. I mean, what's the change in policy? The shift to the left in policy that Romney could have made that would have helped him.
I don't know. I forget which specific policies he fuzzed up in that first debate, but certainly he was claiming that it wouldn't. That the tax cut on the rich was being greatly overblown when you take into account his magical, mysterious deductions that he was going to end. So anything else you want to say? We can move on to what happens if Obama loses. Anything else you want to say about Romney recriminations?
No, that's enough for until we actually get to recrimination season.
Yeah. These are pre-criminations. So I don't know. If Obama loses, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, first of all, people will complain about the first debate, of course, and they may say that what happened to him there was symptomatic of a larger problem with him, which is that he just didn't maintain the progressive passion. I mean, you'll have something, analogous to what you'll have on the right if Romney loses, which is that the base will say he wasn't basey enough. I don't know. What do you imagine? Do you have a clear idea of what kinds of arguments might break out among Democrats?
I don't think you'll have a lot of arguments among Democrats, right? I mean, if Obama loses, I think it'll be, we got dealt a bad deal on the economy. It's not our fault. The Republicans are meanies. They blocked Obama's agenda. If only we'd had a Democratic House, the economy would have been awesome. Our policies are all right. It's just the evil Republicans that blocked them from happening. And, we'll do them next time. I don't see anywhere near the amount of recriminations if Obama loses.
I guess. I mean, it's true that the economy was a burden. I think it's also true. You know what I think? I think a lot of the criticism will be about Obama's communications failures. There's a long-standing complaint that he has really not explained Obamacare to people in a way that makes it appealing. I think he hasn't really done that good a job of talking about the economy. In fact, right now, I'm going to do the ad that I think he should have done. Pardon me for a second while I grab a visual aid that happens to be handy. Just a second. Now, Conn, you won't be able to see this since you can't see me now.
I have a vivid imagination, Bob.
Okay, it's just the jobs per month chart. I mean, I think jobs added per month. I think Obama should have gone on the air with some charts or something, in an ad, maybe, or whatever, and just said, start out by showing, look, I mean, maybe the numbers could be from like the Clinton years or the Reagan years, or the later Reagan years, some number when job growth is healthy, and say, hold up a chart showing job growth month after month like this, and say, this is what a healthy economy looks like. Every single month, jobs are being added. There's job growth, okay? And then he should hold up what he inherited and say, look, this is the end of the Bush years. This is when I came into office. That's what I inherited. Massive, massive, massive job loss. Okay? Here's when the stimulus kicks in. You can see us turning it around. And then, for the last few years, you've seen fundamentally what is the sign of a healthy economy. Job growth every single month. Now, I just think, visual aids can be very persuasive, and it actually kind of makes sense. I mean, if you see where things were headed when he took over, you realize the momentum was working against him. It was going to take some time to turn it around. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, do you really think Obama wants to start bringing out charts, especially with that Christina Romer Bernstein chart from the stimulus?
What does that chart look like? What is that chart?
That's the one that they used in congressional testimony to try to get the stimulus passed, and it shows what the unemployment would be with and without the stimulus, and it would be below 5% with the stimulus and never above 8% with the stimulus, and of course it went up to above 10% and is still around 8% today. That
is not the chart I would recommend he use.
Right. And the other problem with that is if you take the growth. If you would take a jobs per month gained chart of Obama's presidency and throw it up there, the Republicans would just throw up a chart from the Reagan years, or hell, even the Clinton years.
Well, wait, are you saying an average jobs per month number over the entire Obama administration?
Right. If you
but that's the beauty of this chart is that it tells you that that's not what to focus on. He inherited this. He had to climb back up, so obviously the average over his whole term is not that impressive, but these numbers for the last few years, I mean, I haven't done the comparison, but I suspect they are better than his Republican predecessor, and rank up there with a lot of pretty good times in terms of job growth per month over the last several years of the Obama administration.
But the month-to-month job gains, according to BLS, are just extremely weak compared to the Reagan recovery or the Clinton recovery. And if you were to put a month like, here's where the recession ended and here's the month-to-month job growth, you show little tiny Obama numbers down here and then huge Reagan numbers up here.
Well,
it would not be a pretty comparison.
Maybe, although the comparison with the Bush 2 recovery is actually favorable. The jobs grew at a faster rate under...
that's the argument Obama wants to make. Slightly better than Bush.
Well, no, but I mean, Obama, the ad I'm talking about, which I think should have hit the airwaves like exactly 2 days ago, right? Just doesn't have to get into this. It's his damn ad, right? He can use whatever visual aids he wants. Now, if Romney wants to get into the more arcane statistical reply, he can, but it is a more arcane reply. It's like, well, okay, but compare this with 30 years ago. I don't know. I just think Obama really doesn't have much to be ashamed of on the economic front, except for some overly rosy predictions at the outset, which you just alluded to.
Well, Bob, maybe you have a second career as a political consultant around the corner.
I could use one. The journalism business model is not what it used to be. Okay, so... Yeah, I think it will. I think the argument, if Obama loses, will be there will be a lot of finger pointing at Obama. First debate, atmospherics, messaging, and so on.
But you don't think policy-wise there's going to be a lot of soul searching on the left?
I suppose not, because I think people will say, look, fundamentally, we've got the right idea. This multi-ethnic coalition, it's where America's headed. The economy weight is down, but you may be right. Now, I think the more progressive part of the base, the left is going to, which has had issues with Obama's policies all along, will take the opportunity to complain that he wasn't a little more ideologically pure, and I certainly have some issues with him myself. So you'll see some of that.
I've seen Jon Stewart make this argument a number of times. Yes.
Right, but I don't think. I think we may agree that it won't be quite the type of soul searching you'll see if Romney.
I think you'll have a select number of people. I don't think you're going to see a ton of soul searching on the right either. I think no matter who wins, the base of both parties is just going to say, we were right. Our guy was just too moderate.
Mm-hmm. They tend to say that.
They do.
Okay, so as we wrap up, what is the Romney? What do you think is the most likely Romney win scenario in terms of actual states that he wins? Does he have to win Ohio?
He doesn't have to win Ohio. He can win Wisconsin and Iowa. But
what's the most likely combination for him? What are you hoping?
I think it's going to go either or. I think he's going to get Virginia, Ohio, and Wisconsin, or he's going to lose all three.
Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin is the key.
Throw Iowa in there, too. I think we'll know by the time the Virginia elections close who will be the next president.
Mm-hmm. And
not that Virginia is going to be decisive, but that the actual turnout in Virginia will tell us what the turnout's going to look like in other states.
Okay. Okay, so as Virginia goes, you think a number of these key kind of pivotal states will go.
Right.
Just because we'll know whose turnout model was right.
Right. I'm only picking Virginia because it's the easternmost state that will close first.
So that's the bellwether you're looking for.
Right. If the Earth rotated the other way, I would say the same thing about Iowa.
Uh-huh. So we'll find out then. Does the Rasmussen-Gallup model apply, or does the everyone else model apply? Okay, so I guess I can't. I mean, you don't want to. Would you, in your heart of hearts, would you bet even money on Romney if you were being a cold business person about it?
No. I mean, last time I bet with you on Obama, and I won a very nice dinner. That was very nice of you.
I always deliver.
You did deliver. You paid up. It was very nice. But I don't feel confident enough either way to bet this time. I wouldn't bet money on Obama either.
You wouldn't?
No.
Well, wait. If you're a business, if you just want to make money,
I don't have to bet.
But if I force you to bet in this thought experiment, you do.
What kind of business am I running if I'm letting you force me to bet?
You make a good point. I would say. Okay, well then a substitute for this would be, I got to ask you about Nate Silver, because you brought Nate Silver to my attention.
Yes, I'm a big Nate Silver fan.
More than 4 years ago, you did this Blogging Heads dialogue, which we'll link to, with Nate Silver, who is a relative unknown. He was doing this blog called 538, but it wasn't at the Times, and he wasn't nearly as well known. He was known among insiders. He had not, because this was in the spring of 08. But now by the fall of 08, he was pretty well known. Mm-hmm. But this was in the spring of 08. Mm-hmm. And you did this thing that I just listened to, which was a very good conversation, which covered baseball as well as politics. Are you among the Silver slaggers?
I mean, I think there's definitely value added he brings. I think a vast majority of people on the left, far overstate, the certainty with which he brings to it. I mean, just look at the difference between, baseball and politics, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at, how someone did in the minor leagues and have those stats and plug it into a model, those are real numbers. A guy got a hit or he didn't get a hit, he got a double, he got a walk, or he didn't get a walk.
Right.
Polling data is not like that. Polling data is based on a model itself, so it's already derivative. So I think a lot of times you're just taking, it's like mortgage-backed security. You're taking garbage and you're trying to make a steak out of it, and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the reason I worry as an Obama supporter.
I know, you're a worrywart, Bob.
Well, it's partly because I am a worrier. And by the way, you mentioned me in that dialogue with Nate Silver 4 years ago. You said, can you say anything to reassure Bob Wright? Well, but a specific reason I worry is that the technological landscape is changing so fast. Okay, I mean, pollsters know they have this problem. Most people will not talk to a pollster. And then there's the question of, well, how many people have landlines and how many people have cell phones and blah, blah, blah.
And there's no, industry accepted standard practice. They're all just making it up as they go along. As far as, the proper mix of landline, cell phone, how you reach the cell phones. It's not like there's a scientific method, this is how you do it. It's like, well, here's just a bunch of stuff people are trying. And so when Nate says, oh, we have this long history of data, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Right? Pollsters have only been living in this world of cell phones and non-response rates for a couple years.
Well,
the
not
data's
only that,
not there.
Not only that, but it's changing all the time. I mean, in theory, you could address this problem scientifically. You could go back and look at the last election and say, oh, okay, we were assuming this percentage of cell phones, and we were assuming that white people are less likely to pick up and more likely to have caller ID and just not pick up on a pollster, whatever. You could go back and revisit the assumptions, test them against the election outcome, and revise your model. But the problem is, everything is changing so fast.
Right. The technology is changing. How people are living their lives and how they communicate has just changed.
How many have caller ID, their attitudes toward answering phone calls. I mean, that's the problem. And that's why...
As opposed to baseball, where it's been 90 feet, to first base. It's been 60 feet, 6 inches to the plate. With 9 guys on the field. It's the same, hard data in baseball. As opposed to polling, where it's just not. The data is just not as good.
No, I agree. Now, it is true, on the other hand, that when you have the number of state-level pollsters, number of different state-level pollsters, presumably using different methodologies and attempting to compensate for this, and there does seem to be a fair amount of consensus on who's ahead. In cases like that, you could say, well, look, they're all trying different things. Some of them have to be right, and they're all saying Obama wins, which is the case in some states, or at least nobody's saying Romney wins, which is the case in some states. You might say in those states, it's a better bet. But there could be something fundamental that none of them, some subtle change that none of them are getting.
Right. I mean, another, good analogy that Nate uses is, you look at a football game. If someone's down, 27-23 with 30 seconds left, you can say, oh, they have a, 80% probability of winning. But that's based on, years and years of actual data of how, scores, actual football games. We just don't have that kind of data set for the polling environment that we live in now.
Right. It changes too fast. And that's what I think makes this more of a wild card than I would really like to see. So we will see.
We will.
And it may, we may be heading into an era where polls are just increasingly meaningless, which I guess would take us back to the way things were 100 years ago and might be interesting.
I think we're trending that way.
Okay. Well,
Right, just one last shout out here, Bob.
Sure.
I was stuck at a beach, and at the last second, I couldn't decide what book to read, so I picked up Nonzero again.
Oh, God bless you.
And it was even better than I remember it. It is just a truly great book.
I've always said that we need more Americans like Conn Carroll. Your patriotism.
Unfortunately, I have no book for you to plug. But anyways,
I'll tell people to go to the Examiner and read your stuff. You're the guy to read. How are things at the Examiner? You liking that?
It's great. I don't know if we got Ferdoso and Phil Klein and Tim Carney. It's a good bunch over here.
That is a serious bunch, actually. Isn't Byron York there or not?
He is. He's always out on the trail. So,
okay.
I see Carney and Phil all the time. And Byron does, pick up his mail occasionally. But he's always, reporting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's see what happens. Somebody's going to be right and somebody's going to be wrong. And since neither of us But that won't be either of us because we're both unsure.
We're both pretty unsure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time, Conn. Get back to fierce partisan infighting.
I will.
I'll see you on Twitter.
Talk to you later, Bob.
Okay.
Bye.